The mailman doesn't deliver on a Sunday.
If you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball.
Anthony for three. Bang! J.R. Smith! We just saw men fly. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Cleveland! This is for you!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I am Ronan Gaine. Joining me as always, Chris Nambu. Thank you so much for making Coast to Coast your first listen. Once again, we are late to the game here. We're going to be talking a bit on free agency, but we've had a bit more time to look at it, a bit more time to see a couple of deals that have only gone down in the last couple of days. A bit more look at fit and how things are going to look moving forward. We'll also be checking out some of the stars that could still be on the move before the start of next season. But before we do that, I just want to thank you all so much for making Coast to Coast your first listen. And you like what you're hearing, make sure to like, subscribe, and we'll keep producing that content. Chris, how you doing, man? What's up?
I'm pretty good. I should be asking you. I mean, this is wedding season, so we'll give an excuse for missing a couple of days of moratorium. Okay, like we haven't had the Lillard trade yet. You had a nice fun wedding weekend. How you feeling? You good? You rested up?
I'm rested up now. I'm well recovered. I'm glad that the Damian Lillard trade didn't go down while I was on the wedding weekend. It was just a trade request that we finally had to see. But there certainly was some very interesting moves. So I was there with my glass of champagne, watching the Shams and Woj drop their bombs there. You know, just standing in the corner. But it's certainly been an interesting start to free agency.
Yeah, I think we're going to start out with our favorite. Let's just talk about our favorites here. So, like, what was your favorite move or your best move? First 5 days we got here. We don't have the big one yet. We don't have the Dame Lillard trade. I know you've been waiting a year for it, but what did you see that you were like, that's my favorite? That's a good move right there.
Yeah, obviously, there's the main big ones we've seen, but I think Bruce Brown to the Pacers was a big deal. I think it was a smart move from the Pacers, seeing what they were able to offer and the fact that they have a team option on him. So, like you look at it, if he was to get injured, maybe if he wasn't to thrive like he has done in both Denver and Brooklyn, they could sign him to a much nicer contract next year, and they offered him an amount of money for year one that no one else could match, and they knew they were going to get him. So I think I like the fit. Obviously, he's a guy that just seems like the type of player that every competitor should want. So it's a great signing for the Pacers, and it's also a really team-friendly deal that they can work around as well.
Yeah, super team-friendly deal. And yeah, they were able to coach him away. He has obviously championship mentality, and now you can call him an NBA champion. Crazy to say, but I love that move too. We've talked about the Pacers and their team construct and like what they really needed, and we've talked about them being a wing away from having like kind of a complete core. And Bruce Brown isn't technically a wing, but what is Bruce Brown? Bruce Brown is a point guard sometimes. Bruce Brown is he's a spot up shooter sometimes. He's a screener, so sometimes you can even play him as like an inverted pick and roll. Like he does everything. And while he doesn't fit that wing role like perfectly, like he's a guy that for a Pacers team that are trying to get into the playoffs obviously next year, and with the growth that they've had, I like that move. And they also we got to throw in a shout out. They got your boy Obi. How do you think Obi's going to do there?
I think he could really thrive there, to be honest. I think he'll be great playing alongside Halliburton, and I think he's got I could see. Don't think it'd be crazy to think of him as a guy that could definitely be sixth man of the year out there in Indiana.
Okay,
he gets good minutes. He can be a good scorer. Yeah, he maybe lack a little bit on the defensive side of it, but in terms of scoring off the bench, if that's the role he will likely play, especially the fact that he'll likely be playing behind Jarris Walker, I think I really like that move for him. I like the fit, and clearly they made the move. They got him for a steal, two second round picks. It's good business, and they clearly want him and want to play him in like consistent minutes. So I think if he's there getting 20 to somewhere in the 20 to like 24 minutes per game, I think he can have a really big impact.
Yeah, I mean I think he fits exactly what they're trying to do offensively with the spacing that he provides, with the baseline cut. Like he's going to really thrive in what they do. in the Pacers organization. And I want to talk about my favorite now. I've been waiting for this. When we've been talking about like Grant Williams the past year, it's been up and down ever since he had such an amazing playoff run last season. And I gotta say, over and over, like I do not see that as a fluke. I thought he had a weird year with inconsistent minutes, and I think the pressure of free agency, this looming free agency, kind of messed that up. Got a coach that was not committed to his development or keeping him going there. I think when you put him next to Luka Doncic and you look at what the Mavs needed most, I think Grant Williams fits that perfectly. He does everything that they really want Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell to be. I mean, to fit in a guy that can switch 2 through 5, a guy that can shoot the 3 aggressively. And I mean, pick and pop and switching on defense is like the number one thing that they need from a wing and big. I mean, Grant gives them that seamlessly. He can play the wing. He's shown that. He can play 4, and sometimes he can play the 5. And to have that defensively for this team that was just really struggling, I mean, that I think is it's weird that that's my favorite because there's so many interesting signings out here. But I mean, to have him in this system, that's the exact kind of guy that they want.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Literally, it seems like the perfect mold of player that they wanted, and a fairly decent deal as well. I think for what he could bring to the team. And now it's literally the only question mark you have there is like, how does he go from being a guy who has to do it for 25 minutes a night to being a guy that has to do it for probably 35 minutes a night? Because I think he's going to come in and be a starter here, and without doubt, really. If they paid him that money, he does what they need. I don't think he's going to come in and be a mostly bench player like he was out in Boston. So that's literally the only question mark. But in terms of what he brings, and I think in a place where he can develop and be really relied upon, I think that's something that Grant Williams is gonna thrive, a situation that he's really gonna thrive in.
Yeah, and Tibbs is really rubbing off on you. How you're gonna throw him 35 minutes right off the bat. That's
like the what he provides, no one else on the team does. So I mean, he's gonna need to be out there.
No, he is, especially getting Reggie Bullock out of there. I mean, they've not been shy to give Reggie Bullock tons of minutes when Dorian Finney-Smith was there, like throwing him a ton of minutes. I mean, Grant will need to play for sure, especially in the playoffs. I mean, if he's conservatively, like if he's playing 30 minutes a night, I'm not surprised. And that would be like on average, that's a pretty big jump for him, especially from last season. But as a shooter, consistency with minutes, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. And one other kind of obscure one that I liked was probably a bit of an overpay, but Max Strus to Cleveland, I think was a nice move. I think obviously you got a big payday. Obviously that's what happens when you play on a team that goes to the finals and you have a big impact there. But I think I like the fit for the Cavs. They kind of struggled at the 3 spot last year. They couldn't really find a piece that worked consistently there. And I think a guy like Strus, he's this bit of a steady Eddie. He'll keep things going. He won't really differ too much or dip too much. He'll be a consistent performer for the team, and I think that's good for them, and that's something that they need. He can hit his shot, and I think he's going into a situation where he's not going to be relied on to do anything, but he can still have a big impact.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect fit for them, and especially for need. That's another thing. Like when you have a team like the Cavs, when you have a team like the Mavs, we have teams that like have the front side talent, and when you have the top end talent to compete, you're just trying to figure out like, well, what this is missing something. This recipe is missing a couple ingredients, and then the whole dish comes together. And a guy like Max Strus on a team that does not have a movement shooter, that does not have a guy that you need to really chase around the perimeter. Because I mean, no one's really that worried about Caris LeVert shooting threes. I mean, like you have to defend him, but you're not really game planning too hard for that. And you can't really name a significant shooter on this team. Max Strus immediately becomes their best shooter. And for playmakers, it's just huge to have guys like that on the floor. It creates so much more havoc when you're having to deal with the creativity of Garland with the downhill intensity of Mitchell. And then you're also trying to have to figure out how are we going to prevent Max Strus from getting as many shots as he wants. Because I think being the best shooter on this team, I mean, he's going to have perhaps a little bit more freedom. That gives him, a lot more consistency in terms of minutes. And while he did play really patiently and professionally in a Miami Heat situation where, if you don't got it going, then you don't have it going and you're not going to really get many minutes that night. But he's going to get a chance every single night to do what he does best, shoot threes. And that's exactly what the Cavs need. That's exactly what Strus wants. And great signing overall.
Yeah. Who else you got on your list there?
I like that we're doing these other ones. That we're going a little out of the mold, but I really liked Cam Johnson for a couple of reasons. One is the Nets are choosing direction. I think that some people might have seen Cam Johnson as a throw in, like, hey, we might as well get value if we're going to be trading Kevin Durant to the Suns. Get everything we can. Fine. Cam Johnson, good player. Fine, give it to us. But I think they really see Cam Johnson as a part of their future. I mean, as evidenced here. That's number one, just having a direction for a team that has sorely been needing it for a myriad of reasons. But also, I love the fact that they took out the number one competitor for signing Cam Johnson by trading Joe Harris over to Detroit. That just perfect. It was like, hey, we're gonna be at a stalemate here. We're both gonna end up spending way too much money on Cam Johnson. So you guys need a shooter. Here you go, Joe Harris. We'll give him to you for basically nothing. Have fun with that. You got what you need, and don't bother us for Cam Johnson like that. I thought that was perfect because Detroit has been rumored and confirmed, I mean, by multiple sources, that they were really going to go for Cam Johnson all the way up to the free agency moratorium until the trade with Joe Harris. So just shows how much they were committed. They were willing to get off a vet, a guy who mattered to that program, a guy who really grew up in that system and is, one of the league's best shooters. That wasn't nothing to get rid of Joe Harris, a guy that organization committed money to. So not only did they get off that guy, but they committed money to him. Did not shop around. There did not seem to be any news about that. So it's cool to see them have a direction and really be committed to a player like him.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is needed in Brooklyn, and hopefully it's a recipe for success. They actually have some building blocks to build around in that, and hopefully they kind of just build slowly around those guys they have, like Cam Johnson and like Mikal Bridges, and they don't just swing for the fences like they have done to no effect on multiple occasions now. Before we get into the big jumpers and that, we want to talk. You want to mention the Lakers as a whole because of the small little moves that they made, right?
Yeah, this is I can't pick one, but the Lakers really went under the radar, and I really don't understand some noise that's saying the Lakers did not get better or they kind of have flopped in this free agency period. Because I don't know, I guess some people have expected that they were going to make a big change or they're going to make a big trade to get another star, and I don't know when we're going to learn that is just not. Number one, the CBA these days are not going to be friendly to teams that push that way. And we've already seen that having 3 stars was not necessarily the thing that they needed. They needed pieces that fit. And I think the beautiful thing about what they did here is it was all just smart moves. The fact that they were able to keep Reeves and Rui at the prices that they did, fantastic. I mean, those guys got bargain deals to stay with the team. Russell also was a bargain deal. I mean, Gabe Vincent also solid deal, not a huge contract. And Taurean Prince also getting a guy like that. These are all just under the radar moves that Taurean Prince upgrade over Malik Beasley, better defender, more consistent shooter, and just having a guy like Vincent. I mean, just way better fit compared to Schroeder. I mean, Schroeder is good for a number of reasons, and I think he's not given enough credit for what he's done for the Lakers. But Vincent, I mean, to get a guy that is going to be an aggressive shooter for all the reasons we talked about Strus, but also be solid defender too. Like, give Gabe Vincent as a playoff level defender. He's not a guy that's going to back down, and he brings that same mentality that the Lakers are looking for. So to nab him, I mean, they did enough with what they had to retain the surge that they had last season. I think that's what people are forgetting. Lakers went from a team that had the most rotation leagues, they couldn't figure out what they want to do, and they couldn't keep everyone healthy, to then having a team that was honestly like a top 5 team in the West, and a team that was, that fell just short of the Nuggets. I mean, I know that's crazy, even though they got swept, but they were there. They were there. Game 1, they could have won that. Game 2, they could have won that. Game 3 is up there, and it was not. It was closer than it looked, and I think they're going to be right there because of what they did in this offseason, in this moratorium.
Yeah, I mean, and the big thing as well is like they have a roster that on paper they have a roster that makes sense, probably for the first time since they won the title there back in 1920 when they acquired Anthony Davis and a few other veteran guys.
1920, all the way back, the 20th century. The Lakers even around then? I don't know.
Yeah, probably Minneapolis back then, but sure. You know what I meant there. Come on, man. But it's the smart moves were made, and they did a lot with what the limited resources that they had. They did a lot. They got good backups. You're going to see, I'd say we'll probably see a nice little mix of both Russell and Gabe Vincent, kind of mix and matching who starts, who gets more minutes, whatever the flow of the game is. And you kind of look at then, you're kind of thinking, it switches then to what sort of drop off are we going to see from LeBron? And like, if you're looking at this roster and LeBron and Davis are both able to play 60 games at least next year, then you're looking at a team that could easily be winning 50 games. No problem whatsoever. They should be right up there. I know a lot of good teams are in the Western Conference, but they should definitely be a top 4 team in the West with this roster, and enough games played from both AD and LeBron.
Yeah, and 2 things. One, how much do you think a max contract would be in 1920? Like $1,000? Austin Reeves would be the Michael Jordan of NBA in the 1920s for sure. Like he would be. You imagine LeBron James in 1920? They'd be sending him they'd be sending him to Area 21. I think he's an alien. And 2, I think the guys that they have in this team, LeBron and AD, are going to be able to get some rest. Not a great thing to hear for season ticket holders, but or anyone trying to see a game for that matter. But it's another year under the belt, and AD had not the healthiest season of all time, but at the end, he held it together for sure. But you're going to want to keep them healthy. And you got guys who are hungry for more. I mean, Rui is hungry for more. I mean, he was able to show it on a big stage that he can be a very streaky player. But if he can put it together, you get more consistency. I mean, that's a guy that's willing to grow. You got guys that are willing to grow, and that's something on this team that you can let go of the leash a little bit, see how they do. How much better can Reeves get? And I love these 2 guys that they got. When you look at Cam Reddish, it's like, I think most people are out on Cam Reddish. They don't think there's anything left there. But if you say, hey, you're about to play with LeBron James, you're about to play for the Lakers, like, play your heart out. Just play defense. Like, you're going to be on this team to compete for a championship. And if defensive consistency is coming from Cam Reddish, that is a guy who has the physical tools to be a elite, top-notch, top echelon defender. It's there. I mean, it's there in flashes, and it's never put it together fully. And I don't think he's been fully bought into. And then Jackson Hayes too. I mean, Jackson Hayes, a guy who has true NBA athleticism at the 5 position with skill, but with very little opportunity. And I think that it just did not work out for him, for the Pelicans. And, whenever you play with LeBron James, you play with the Lakers, you play in that organization. I mean, they give guys chances, and to get a chance with this organization, maybe it pans out, maybe it doesn't, but you have a whole year to figure that out. And I think that's a very different position from when they were in last year. Last year was like, all right, we're just going to throw these guys, let's see what happens, and we'll figure it out from there. I mean, as evidenced by their 500 different lineups. It's not a real knife. I think it was it 100? can't be. I mean, with math, I'm sure that you can come up with 100 different rotations given the amount of people out there, and Max Christie still exists apparently. But all in all, Lakers, I think they got to be commended for the level-headed moves they made, and by the low risk, high reward moves they made. And you don't need a splashy signing. They proved that with what they have at the end of last season that they can still do a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got one more.
Go on.
Got one more. A guy who went from like, who is that, to then a meme because Anthony Edwards dunked all in his face, to becoming a top 3-point shooter last year. Yuta Watanabe.
Yes.
Like from nothing to a guy that a championship, like not a championship contender, a we need to win this championship type team. Like there's no other option to win a championship. A guy that team, the Phoenix Suns, was like, I need him. Get me him. I need a guy to surround Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal with. I'm gonna get Yuta Watanabe. Like that's such an amazing development for a guy that was very raw, had very little skill, but just played his heart out, like absolute competitor on defense. There's a reason why he's getting put on posters. It's because he contests and he uses verticality. I mean, he's got great fundamentals as a defender, and he really cares. I mean, he throws his body around on the floor, and I think in interviews you really saw that from Nets players, especially Kevin Durant, to really endorse how much of a competitor he is. Because he I remember he had a quote last year just talking about Yuta, about how he had to tell Yuta, like, relax, like you don't have to like go crazy like that every time you get on the floor. Like you have those minutes, you earn those. But that's just Yuta's mentality, and that's a championship mentality. Like you saw that with guys at the Nuggets. He's got that chip on his shoulder, but very, very focused on what he does best now. And I think legitimately he's a guy that they really needed after they lost Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges, not having a long 3-point shooting wing like that. That's something that he's going to bring, that he's going to have very valuable minutes there. I mean, he's going to have moments next year if he continues to play that he does, that I don't know if he'll have ever dreamed having. If he's going to be in the Western Conference Finals, if he's going to be even in the finals, I think everyone's already looking at the Suns as the favorite, given that they got Brad. But Yuta's going to have his time, and that's pretty exciting for a guy who was a big question. Who's that guy? I don't know. Who, Yuta Watanabe, the guy who got dunked on? No, he's Yuta Watanabe. He's going to be a championship contender next year with Kevin Durant.
Yeah, absolutely. I was shocked when I saw that deal, because he definitely could have got a pretty nice payday elsewhere. But it shows commitment, the desire to want to be playing alongside the best and playing to win. That was a really great pickup. For respect to the Suns for being able to make that deal happen. Well, let's switch it over then to teams on the whole. Who do you think were the biggest jumpers after the first week of free agency?
I think you look at this, and I think there's two teams that are going to make the biggest jump. And the one obvious one, the one that I'm really, really excited to talk about, man, is Houston Rockets. Like, what a 180. What a 180. And number one, do not look up Jalen Green on Twitter right now for nothing. I just don't do it. Don't do it. But before we get into this, but the Rockets are just a meme all year. I mean, they were literally just looked at as a group of kids, could not get it together. Like, I think we talked more about getting Eric Gordon out of there than we talked about what they've done to develop. And I think it's just because of how disorganized they've been, how like they just didn't have any culture to speak of, winning culture to speak of. And what they do, they got Udoka. And then in free agency, they really, just nailed it. Absolutely nailed it in terms of leadership. They got Fred VanVleet, which I thought that was always the signing that made the most sense for both parties involved. But Fred, that's an all-star. That's a champion. And I'm sure that he was entertaining going back to Toronto. I'm sure there's other suitors. But for the Raptors to get him as a leader and as a lead point guard, and a shooter next to Jalen Green, like home run move. And then you get I don't know if you love this move, but I think getting Dillon Brooks in there, you absolutely needed a guy like that. You needed a guy that was your culture setter on defense. That, I mean, anybody would love to have a guy that's just a nasty defender. The guy that's going to go to war with everybody. Like, I don't think the Rockets really have that. Like, the Rockets have talented young guys, but they don't have a guy who's out there that is really embracing conflict in the way that you need to have that edge. Like, he really is going to give them an edge. Yeah, he's going to brick a lot of jumpers. Yeah, it's going to be really frustrating, and you're going to be posting about his $20 million average contract to shoot 33% from three, but it doesn't matter. Like, they don't have that, but they have guys that can do that. So that's what I don't know if you're as pumped as I am about it, but I think that these deals unlock the potential of these players and unlock, this winning mentality. And you're going to be able to get the full experience from Udoka with these guys now that you actually have leaders on the floor and, in the coach's office.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think obviously a lot of money for a guy like Dillon Brooks, but hopefully what happened in Memphis, hopefully he's learned from that. Like, obviously you don't want to take the dog out of him. You don't want him to completely change, but he just needs to be a little bit smarter in certain aspects. He doesn't need to be the problem. He needs to be the culture setter. He needs to be the guy that sets the defensive identity. That's what the Houston Rockets are going to build around now. The dog of Dillon Brooks on the defensive end. That's where he provides the biggest impact. That's the biggest thing that the Rockets needed. They had no defense really whatsoever last year. Dillon Brooks can absolutely come in, be that culture setter. I think Udoka will be able to coach him well as well. And then VanVleet, obviously, great move. Great to see a guy who went undrafted, first becoming a champion, now getting a $130 million contract. It's really awesome for him. He's definitely had to put in the grind to earn it. Some may say he's overpaid, but I don't care. I'm not the one paying him, so I'm just going to respect him for doing it. Then obviously you got
It's an all-star.
Jock Landale. That's a pretty nice deal for him. Obviously showed what he could do in the playoffs and later last year with Phoenix. Nice little deal for him. Surprised he got paid as much as he did. I kind of figured he would go back to Phoenix maybe, but fair play to him. That's a nice deal. He can have a solid impact there. And then getting the guy like Jeff Green as well. That's another great veteran presence, an NBA champion coming into the team. The only thing that's a downside for me is I'm kind of thinking some of the young guys' minutes are going to take a hit here, which kind of disappoints me. I'm like, where the hell is Cam Whitmore going to fit in this? Are we going to see him? Are we really going to see him at all? I know that's kind of, it was always a long shot, but I was looking forward to at least seeing him a little bit, which is something I don't think we're going to see at all now. And maybe he might even get moved on. But on the whole, for Houston, they definitely brought in guys that can take them to being a team that's at least around the play-in next year, and I didn't think that was the case before or after the draft.
Yeah, I think there's so many levels to player development, and I think the Rockets did a lot of smart things, and I'll get to the Cam Whitmore thing because I think that's important. But you saw they moved Josh Christopher to the Grizzlies, who I won't spend any time on that, but I think that's a great reclamation. There's a few reclamation projects going on in free agency, and I think that could be a really interesting one. Watch Josh Christopher in Memphis. Memphis is not missed on talent, and I think the Rockets had a lot of talent, including Josh. They got rid of him. They got rid of Garuba and Ty Washington of the Hawks for nothing. Garuba, a guy who I think has tremendous defensive upside, but so does Tari Eason. You got to make room for him. And the minutes are definitely going to be tough, but I think I feel like we can talk about this a lot. But what you see in teams with good competition is either there is strife, and that comes from a lack of vision. Like maybe there's not a team commitment to winning, because teams that are committed to winning, like they're okay with there's good competition. And while you would maybe upset with minutes, you look at the Heat. Everyone's locked in because everyone knows that this is for the best of the team and everyone's committed. And I think that to have pressure to continue to improve is something that's important. But you can't have too many guys doing that. So I mean, they got rid of guys who are going to be, it's unfair to them in their career for to not have a chance to make it, and it's also not good for the team. So they got rid of those guys, and you focus around Tari Eason, you focus around Jabari Smith Jr. Getting those guys minutes and getting them minutes in a situation where like you do have a leash because you're a recent draft pick and you're a talented young guy, but also if you're playing like an idiot, like we're just gonna play Jeff Green. Like why you can't play like that when you have that? You're not gonna be able to do that when you have Dylan Brooks on the floor. Like there's gonna be so much development that comes from not just the leadership, like, but also the competition that comes from veterans that actually can play and have just recently competed in the playoffs and some of them in the finals. And with Cam Whitmore, I think it's important to be patient because he's an incredibly raw player. Same thing with Amen Thompson, but I think Amen Thompson has a lot more to contribute in terms of playmaking, that he's going to get more minutes that way. But I think what they just did here, not only with what they got with coaching, but with what they've done in free agency, I think tells me that they are going to be very patient with these guys. They're going to be committed to winning, and Cam Whitmore is going to play a lot of G League games. I'm not going to be shocked, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Look at Jaden Hardy. Jaden Hardy, incredibly raw player, just needs some time developing in the NBA. Learning the NBA game, learning not just how to play, but even just how to work in the system, and that's going to be huge for him to do that in the G League. So I think you look at what Jaden Hardy did, and now he's killing it in the G League. He killed it in Summer League. He had some great moments at the end of the season with the Mavs. And now you go into season 2 and you're like, I'm pretty excited to see Jaden Hardy. That's pretty exciting because he got the time to develop. And I think Cam, for a guy who one of his biggest flaws is feel for the game, you can do that in the G League. I don't think the Rockets have time for that. They're going to go into the season like, we need to win now. And the young guys are going to have to contribute to that. And guys like Cam Whitmore, who are very raw, like, that's fine if you need time in the G League. They don't need him right now, and I think that's a really good spot for him to be in.
Yeah, actually, that's fair. I didn't really think about that. I think that's a good thought. You've made me happy there. That saying that.
Cam's gonna be fine. I promise. It's gonna be okay.
What about then? Do the Rockets win 40 games this year?
The question then becomes: are they gonna supplant Are they going to make a 10 seed? Is that kind of where that lands? Like a 10 seed?
Yeah.
I think let's think best case scenario. Like really, like not insane best case scenario. Like I'm gonna be like Jalen Green's gonna be an all-star. Like, no, we won't go there. But let's say Jalen Green is an efficient 20, 24, 25 per game scorer, 25, 5 and 5 guy. I can buy that for sure. VanVleet with consistency. I mean, that I think that's what killed him with the Raptors. Like they switched systems on him, and it really hurt him. VanVleet gets back to 85% of what he was in his All-Star season. Dylan Brooks takes less bad shots, but he's still the defender he is. And you get a little bit of development from Jabari Smith. He really had a great turnaround there at the end of the season. I mean, I think you're looking at a talented core of guys who legitimately could be a 9 or 10 seed. Absolutely. And I mean, if I just blow the top off the expectations for Jalen Green, I mean, that is a guy. I mean, I really do believe Jalen Green's a guy that is going to be an All NBA player like every year once he figures it out. And sometimes players jump. Like sometimes, like it all comes together quickly. And I think the recipe that they just put together could be a situation where that happens. But I don't want to sit here on this podcast and like freak out about like Jalen Green having an all-star season next year, because obviously he's not gonna be an all-star with the packed West right now, but he has an all-star caliber season. I mean, I see this being an 8 seed potentially. Best case scenario. I mean, and that's with all these young guys still being kind of raw. Not all of them are gonna figure it out together, but 40 games, yeah. I mean that would be a massive jump. That would be probably, how many games they win? 20. You got that off the top of your head?
No, I don't got
Not
that. No.
they
Yeah,
might
definitely
double.
was definitely less than 25. I think anyway.
They might double their. I think they would approach doubling their win count. Not maybe not all the way. They're not going to win 50 games. They're not going to win 48 games, but 40 games on the nose. I wouldn't be super shocked if you're telling me that by the end of next season. I won't be super shocked.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. And then what's your second team? Who are you looking at then?
The Mavs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just a jump from being out of the playoffs to going back to being at least a 6 seed. We'll see. We'll see ultimately how the pairing of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving goes. But for them to retain Kyrie was, I mean, that's number one priority. Number one, they got that done. Beside all the posturing from Kyrie, which like it was funny. I forget what team it was, but like there's like a report out like that they were planning to meet with him in free agency, and then like representatives from that team were like, we're not planning to meet with him. So just a lot of things stirring up, a lot of fake news. But he's gonna be a Maverick. That's that, right? That can't possibly go wrong. He's not gonna ask out, right? That's not happening because he extended. Just get that out of the way. But then you get Grant Williams, and hopefully, Tybal. If they can get Tybal, and this has not been confirmed yet, I think you have 24 hours to match. I might be messing that up, but the Blazers have a little bit of time to think things over if they want to match for Tybal. But if they get Grant Williams and they get Tybal, and I think they had a great draft getting Rashawn Holmes in a trade and Lively. They've got all the ingredients they need to make things better and to stabilize their defense. And that's just number one. They clearly prioritize defense. And I think the continuity too between Luka and Kyrie. You can tell that there's still a little bit of things that they needed to figure out. The continuity, I think, is going to be huge for them to make a jump, and they added the defense around them necessarily to just hold the lead. Number one, but I think that they're gonna make some noise next year, and I think they're gonna be back where they belong, out of the plan, and that's a pretty big jump for a team that totally missed the playoffs this year.
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously the defense is the biggest hole. They've added a guy who's a 3-and-D man. We already talked about Grant Williams. They could possibly also have Thybulle in there too. Obviously, not much on offense, but in terms of a defensive impact, he can definitely provide there. They added Seth Curry, who's a legit knockdown 3-point shooter, which is something that they didn't really have. They had guys that can sometimes sort of kind of do it, but Seth Curry is one that I think they can rely on that bit more. They got Kyrie back. They bring Dwight Powell back. I think they've made smart moves. They've had a really good couple of weeks in terms of the draft and free agency, and it was important that they did that without panicking. The big thing obviously was getting Kyrie back. That was obviously crucial. They completed that. Now it's the question of the growth. We're going to have to see growth from Luka. We're definitely going to have to see growth from a couple of the other young guys that are within the roster, but I've been impressed with the moves they've made. I thought they were going to have to do something crazy, but they've been quite calculated and smart with what they've done, and they're definitely on paper in a position to absolutely really kick on after a really disappointing year last year.
Yeah. I think those are my two in terms of looking at teams that are going to make a big jump because of free agency, at least. Pacers, I'm close. I'm really close with the Pacers. I mean, I think they're already going to be pretty great with or without Brown, but maybe Brown makes that a big difference. Pistons, adding some shooting to a team that did not have enough shooting around Cade, and Cade gets another year of development, hopefully not too lost with being injured. Pistons possibly, maybe Cavs. Cavs for a jump for them is, they go from a team that gets bounced in the first round, and I don't know how much of having a legit shooter unlocks that team. Maybe it unlocks it more than I'm realizing, but maybe that's a team that significantly jumps. But I think those are going to be the biggest ones. I'm really betting on the Rockets. I'm really betting on the Rockets. I really believe that they have a shot at least winning a game in the play-in. That's that's a pretty modest high expectation for them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think two teams I mentioned that aren't taking big jumps. They're teams that were going to be there anyway, but I like what the Suns did. I think the additions they were able to make with the limited amount of contracts and money that they had, getting Gordon and Watanabe was great. Bringing back Okogie and Lee, that was smart. Bates, Diop, Eubanks, just solid additions. I think that was they had a solid start to free agency. They were very limited, but they made some smart moves. I think I like how they've kind of filled out their roster. I also mentioned the Bucks. I think obviously they had to have been under pressure from Giannis. They brought back everyone they needed to bring back. Also added in Malik Beasley there. I think obviously Middleton had to come back. Lopez absolutely had to come back. Beasley, hopefully he can have a bit more of an impact than he did when he went to LA last year. Crowder is a good guy to be bringing back. Robin Lopez, yeah, whatever. They got Robin Lopez in there, whatever. But that was obviously something they had no choice but to do. If they had missed out on bringing back any of the guys that they had last year, there would have been a few question marks about them. So they just went and did exactly what they needed to do. Let's see what sort of impact it has and what way they go this year. It's going to be interesting, but definitely just smart moves. They did what they had to, and gives them another chance to be a top 2 seed in the East next year.
Yeah, I don't think Middleton was ever going to go anywhere, but keeping Lopez, that was kind of sketchy. Like, you didn't know, maybe he gets over to the Heat, maybe, and that would have been catastrophic if he made it to an Eastern Conference contender. Maybe he goes over to the Lakers. Maybe he goes over to the Suns. Maybe he actually takes some money. He goes over to Houston. I mean, Houston had money, but to keep him around on a bargain deal, I mean, that was probably the biggest piece. And Beasley, yeah, that's I think the Lakers were kind of betting on him being just a laser, and at times he was. I think that the Bucks just need a guy that you kick the rock out to and is going to, like, no questions asked, take that shot. And having a guy besides Pat Connaughton, besides Grayson Allen to do that, I mean, that adds just that much. I think he has some potential there. But just keeping the band together. And Robin Lopez, I mean, you love the Robin and Brooke antics. I mean, that's fun. I mean, please throw a 2 big man lineup. Put Giannis at the 3. Put the Lopez twins at 4 and 5. Brooke can space out, and we'll rock that. That'll be pretty fun. But what do you think was the craziest contract? I mean, and crazy in terms of, like, maybe unnecessary or kind of confusing. That there were some weird contracts and maybe crazy contracts. Let's talk about the Bane one first.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I hesitate to say overpay because that's such a loaded term, but this Desmond Bane, 5 years, $207 million. Is that an overpay for Desmond Bane?
Maybe just, but at the same time, you're like, this is the building block alongside the guy you believe to be your true superstar in Ja Morant. Hopefully, after his suspension, everything, he comes back, gets everything back on track. But it's also the cover knowing that if Ja's now on a trajectory that it's going to continue to deteriorate from here, hopefully that isn't the case. You have to keep around a guy like Desmond Bane. Yeah, maybe he's never going to be your lead guy or your lead point scorer, lead assister, or anything like that. But the defense he brings, the shooting he adds, the potential he has, he's definitely a guy that could have that could hit a few All-Star games. He's definitely a guy you want in a team that's looking to compete. Maybe a slight overpayment, but I get why the Grizzlies made the deal.
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep homegrown talent in Memphis. You're not going to attract major signings, and that's just the fact. Like, when's the last time that happened? And I mean, for a guy like Bane, who's an older player, late first round pick, and was third. I want to say 30th pick in the draft. He was at least late 20s. But a guy like that to be making 207, that's insane to me. I mean, not in a bad way. I mean, I'm glad he got his bag, and let's justify this for a second, that he's a guy that until he kind of hit a rough patch here in the playoffs this year, I mean, he was historically efficient shooting in the playoffs. I mean, a guy that did not shy away from the moment when Ja went down a couple years ago. I mean, he was leading the team, and Desmond Bane's a guy that I think will remain a top 10 shooter in this league, at times top 5. I mean, he's taken volume that Steph Curry is taking. He's approaching that Fred VanVleet, Steph Curry level of volume from shooting. And there's not a lot of guys who can do that, and also be a guy that's going to take guys off the bounce, and also a guy that's going to compete defensively. So it's tough to pay over $200 million to a guy that you're not sure is going to make an All-Star game. It's kind of like a CJ McCollum situation. Chris Middleton got an All-Star, but I don't know if he's ever going to escape that now, because now it's going to be, well, you're paying $200, why are you an All-Star? I mean, that expectation is going to constantly chase him, the same way that it's chased CJ McCollum, the same way that it chased Mike Conley. He's going to be a great player that's going to be just short of meeting the expectations that his contract probably says he should. But at any rate, happy that he got that. Absolutely happy that he got that. What about Jeremy Grant? That's got to be the weirdest, craziest contract of all of free agency, because he signs this 5-year, not a 3-year, not a 2-player option, big contract sort of deal. Like, you got like 5 years in Portland, like I'm gonna be here and spend the rest of my prime here contract, and then like 8 hours later, Lillard's like, yeah, I'm out. What? How I don't even understand how that happens. The communication clearly wasn't there with Dame. Do you think that was an accident, or are they going to stick with him? Is Grant stuck there? Like, what even comes to mind?
Yeah, obviously it's a very strange situation. I guess they were kind of thinking we have no choice but to get Grant back because we want to keep Dame. That was obviously their thinking when they made that deal. And I guess it was probably in Grant's mind as well that he wanted to come back because he wanted to play alongside Dame and try and be this winner with Dame in Portland. And then very quickly after that, it's, yeah, I want out. Get me out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. So it's going to be interesting to see what he will be thinking now. But it's definitely a weird one when you think this is a team that could possibly go into a rebuild. According to them, they're going to just keep on being committed to winning, and they're going to out on the limb. But this is a team that's going to be growing and building around two young guys, two fairly raw talents, obviously, in Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson. So it's going to be another one with Dame leaving and with what they could possibly get back. It's going to be, you're thinking on paper, it's going to be like 2-3 years before this is a team that you're like, oh, they're definitely going to be in the playoffs this year. That's how it feels looking at it from the outside. So yeah, it was definitely a strange one. And it's just kind of a question now. It's like, where would they be able to move him to? Where could he go now after signing that contract? It's going to be tough for him to move on, and it could almost ultimately waste the best years that he has left, or it could be a good move for him. It's going to be one that you look back on in a couple of years, and then you'll be able to really make a true judgment on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it tells me that it feels like tanking is kind of dead. Not super dead, because I mean, you saw the team still trying to stay in that top 4 in the lottery, but I don't think you see teams anymore that are just like, I need to tear everything down to stay the worst team in the league. So I think that's moves that you see happen, and maybe it's also a signal that the draft class next year seems like is not as strong, but it feels very similar to what the Wizards did too. I mean, I think we can discuss both these in the same light, where they just extended Kuzma 4 years for, I mean, modest deal, $25-26 million, but on a team that you think is like, all right, this is a complete teardown, this is a complete rebuild, but it feels like they're still trying to be competitive. I mean, same thing with the Blazers. I mean, the Wizards, like I talked to them, man. I mean, they could be weirdly kind of good. Maybe I think you have a starting lineup with like a Tyus Jones, Kyle Kuzma, Corey Kispert, Jordan Poole, Danny Avdia, and you got bigs and Gafford, Escala, you got veterans in Gallinari and Gibson. Like, this isn't a team that's like, okay, we just got Bilal, let's just tear everything down and see what happens. Like, they got some guys. I mean, same thing with the Blazers. I mean, I think they believe that, if Dame's not going to be here, fine. We have Anthony Simons, a guy who for a couple months was averaging like 30 points a game and shooting 50, 40, 90. So sure, we'll rock with that. And we'll see how much more we get from Sharp. We'll see how much more we get from our young guys. And Grant, bring him along for the ride. So in that light, I'm not going to be surprised if they also if they pay the money to keep Thibault. But I think maybe this signals to me that the Blazers are willing to be like not the worst team next year. I don't. That's a weird statement to make, but willing to be a moderately competitive team. And I mean, Grant dealt with that in Detroit and didn't seem too unhappy. I don't know. So I mean, I don't know if this is just a situation he's in, and it's weird to see some players like that, like a guy who could have stayed in Denver. He could have been in Aaron Gordon's place. He could have been right there winning a championship. I'm really curious if he thinks about that, but I don't think it's a mistake. Honestly, I think it's pretty intentional that they're like, whether or not Dame stays, like, we'll keep Jeremy Grant and we'll keep it pushing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. One of the low key ones I thought it was just weird to just see the collapse in what his market was the Russell Westbrook deal. 2 years, $8 million to stay with the Clippers. Obviously, I think it's a move where it was like, I want to stay, I want to be on a team that are thriving to win a championship. But it was also just crazy to think that there's obviously just no market for Russell Westbrook whatsoever. Like, the money there. Like, to think of a former MVP, a guy that the last contract he's just after coming off, and now to be on a $4 million a year deal, it's kind of insane. But I think it's the right move for him, because I think the best thing for him to be on a team that's looking to win now, that's looking to compete, and just doing what he can to be a good role player on that team. But we're looking at it, it was just surprising to see the complete drop off for a guy like Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, especially when you zoom out like that and think about where he's been just 3 years ago, and then zoom out for you. Like, it's pretty precipitous, and it's shocking, I think, for a player that I think most fans hold pretty dear. I mean, I loved Russell Westbrook's game. I think for sure, if you're a Lakers fan, it's been up and down. It was an up and down experience, frustrating. But for a guy who's going to be a instant Hall of Famer, second he's out of the league, I mean, it is interesting to see how these guys ended. And I think it's perfect, honestly. This is the exact place. Who else is going to give him the minutes that he wants to play? Who else is going to give him the freedom? And where else is that freedom going to lead to the same positive results that I think it'll continue to have in LA? I think that the Clippers, I mean, that was a perfect match for both of them. And at least not on a vet man. I mean, I think that would have been the wow moment where, like, Westbrook finally hits the situation where he's playing for veteran minimums. But in LA, I believe, I mean, I don't know where that core is going to go, because the health thing is just always going to be the issue. But I think he can be himself on that team, and that's the perfect place for him to be. So I'm glad he's staying there, and I think they'll continue to be competitive. I mean, as long as Kawhi is healthy, you never know with this team. They haven't had a healthy season, but that's just another team to keep an eye on. Low-key one, that was weird. I don't understand this, not just because this is just a microcosm. This is not any knock on Jalen McDaniels, who got signed by the Raptors. I like Jalen McDaniels. I think he's a great player. I think that he could be a contributor on, like, a real contending team. I mean, he's amazing, like, turning into a shooter. Not quite there yet, but just tools that he has. But why do the Raptors need another guy like this?
Yeah.
I don't. I understand I think the vision to have a team full of guys that, that can switch defensively, that kind of can do it all. Maybe, like, maybe he could be kind of a wing It seems more as he's playing the 4, but he seems a little bit limited there. But I don't see a situation where that's a meaningful addition to Scotty Barnes' development, especially after you just lost Fred VanVleet. Yeah, you had your backup plan in Dennis Schroeder, but I don't really get where they're going. Pirtle, yeah, you had to keep him in there. You needed a big, but I think signing Jalen McDaniels just felt like a microcosm of a team that is obsessed with the vision that I don't know produces the best result for Scotty long term. And yeah, it doesn't seem like they're doing much else either.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird one just in terms of the overall fit and the players that are already in that team. But then it also kind of makes you think that there's also the possibility that they could be a team that knows they may end up selling off a few pieces as well. That's what that kind of deal kind of looked like to me. Or maybe they'll see him as an asset that they could possibly move. It's definitely a bit of a strange one, but I guess they're in a mold where they know they're not going to be a competitor next year, and maybe it's important to have pieces that potentially other teams that are looking to contend may want, that they can get extra pieces out of that. Maybe that's what they're thinking. But yeah, it was definitely a bit of an eye opener when I saw that in terms of just the overall fit. It was definitely a bit of a strange one. Any more, or will we close it out and talk about the few big stars that could still be on the move before the end of the year?
Yeah, who do you got?
Well, obviously the obvious ones, Damian Lillard has finally requested a trade. Only wants Miami apparently, which is just a bit strange because for Portland, that's all I'm saying is that the package they can get off Miami is not at the level of the package they could get off of more than a few teams in both the East and the West. And then James Harden, he apparently only wants the Clippers. But I think Philly are going to drive a hard bargain there. Think about what they asked for Tobias Harris. If they're looking for the same level of for James Harden, I don't think he's going to be moving anywhere, and he's going to be staying in Philly. But it's weird to see. Obviously, they're the two main ones. That they're both players that apparently are saying, "I only want to go here. I don't want to go anywhere else," which is just it's a bit weird and a bit ambitious for the two of them.
I think if Dame went somewhere like I don't know, if he found his way to, it seems like he'd be fine on the Celtics, and that seems to be really. I think a lot of people hold their breath for if that ended up being a Jaylen Brown for Dame kind of deal. But you can't sign and trade the max that Brown had. That also has to be kept in mind. But yeah, I'm still. Do you have any places you'd want to see Dame? Because it feels like now when a guy like him pushes for Miami, as much as like we posture for like, well, that doesn't make sense for the team. It just always seems to happen. And I think the calculus is always like, well, if he's got a long contract like that, do you want an unhappy superstar and do you want to get off all those assets for a guy who doesn't even want to be there? How much better is that going to be compared to just like doing what we have now? And that seems to be a common issue. So, I mean, if it's not Miami, where would you want to see him?
The Knicks.
Yeah, outside of the Knicks, of course. Yeah. Minnesota is a low key one because I think they need to move off of Cat, but I just don't know about the fit on the whole there. I think the idea of like taking the ball that much more out of Ant's hands, I don't know if I like that, but I also think it could definitely work. It would definitely have them in a better situation than they're in now. But that'd be a more interesting one. Obviously, I like it in Miami. I'm not saying that I don't want to see Dame playing in Miami. It's just I think the package that they could get off other teams would be a bit more favorable than what they could get. They're just going to get a whole load more guards that they don't need, and probably not the best draft picks in the world. So obviously Miami is the ideal one because I think he provides exactly what they need. Just that locked on dead eye scorer alongside the great defensive pieces like Bam and like Jimmy Butler. But there's definitely other teams that I think could even trade them. That guy has got a bit more star potential, a bit more of a better fit within what the Blazers already have. And Minnesota is one that I definitely like the look of more so because I just want to see them move off of Cap, and it would be pretty cool to see someone like Dame playing out there.
Scoot, Simons, Sharp, Grant, Karl-Anthony Towns. That's fascinating.
The fun team.
That's really interesting. Would I buy into that long term? I think I might. I mean, if the Timberwolves approach me with that, that's my biggest position of need. That's a best shooting big in the league, and according to Cat history. So I guess you got to keep taking with that. Who else is going to offer a all NBA level, potential level player for Dame Lillard in this situation? Pretty much nobody, because all those other teams need to keep their all NBA guy to be successful. And ironically, I think the Timberwolves are one of the only teams right now that could give up what is arguably their most talented second 1A, 1B talented player. Do you see that somewhere? That I like that. I would 100% co-sign that. I think Karl-Anthony Towns switch for Dame Lillard, just in terms of what the Blazers would want. What does Dame want? I mean, that's you seem to love small market teams. I mean, why don't you just keep it rocking with small market West Coast teams? That's fascinating. I mean, why would the Blazers, if you're the Blazers, like, truthfully, if the Timberwolves are like, hey, like, we just need to figure this out. Both teams are in very precarious situations. I mean, I would do that. And I think that the Timberwolves would not have to give up a ton of future assets. Because I think the Blazers too, maybe they believe in the two big assets they have right now. Maybe they believe, okay, we have Scoot, we have Sharp. That those are the two guys that we want to develop around, and then we'll just figure out picks later. We don't need a ton of first rounders to make it work. Is Cat enough? I think I might do that, especially if you're looking at the fact that they're keeping around Jeremy Grant and they're thinking about the short future, not the long future. Those are two very different things. Then I like that.
Yeah, it's a historic day. Chris actually agreeing with one of my trade ideas.
Look at that. That actually makes sense.
First time for everything, huh? What about James
now
Harden?
You can ruin it with the James Harden idea.
I honestly don't know.
My take is.
What do you think?
My hot take. I don't think he's gonna get traded.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's gonna get traded because I don't think there's a great trade for him that makes sense for other teams as well. I think he's staying. I think it's gonna be an awkward, like, sorry, dude, like, we can't figure out something that makes sense. And he's just going to have to deal with the fact that it makes the most sense for him to stay in Philly.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think obviously we saw the market was not there for him whatsoever. That's why he had to opt into his deal. Obviously he's saying that he wants to be moved. He wants to be traded. Just standard from James Harden at this stage. He just doesn't really like it anywhere. He's never going to be happy anywhere. So, I mean, it's definitely going to be most likely that it's a run it back sort of situation, but it's going to be interesting. It'd be interesting to see what the mentality of Joel Embiid is, knowing that a guy like Harden doesn't want to come back. Where does he see this Philadelphia team going, and maybe what sort of pressure can he put on the higher ups to possibly either just go out and make a move or know that they're still building in the right direction.
Yeah, Joel seems like Embiid seems like he's been not complacent, but okay with whatever the Sixers do. He's always seemed to be a great teammate in that regard, where he's not really except for Ben. But I think that he's gonna stick it out there. He's not gonna be the type to do that. He doesn't strike me as a guy who would make real pressure on the front office to either move someone else or move him or anything like that. But it is going to be, I mean, that's just going to be an awkward training camp, man. Like, hey, sorry I tried to get out. Like, let's have a great season. I really believe in us. Like, how are those locker room speeches going to go? I don't know how many locker room speeches James Harden is doing, but it's going to be a little less inspiring when it's like, dude, you tried to leave us like 2 months ago. Like, why are you? It's just going to be weird. let me put another trade to bed while we're at it. Zach LaVine is not being traded. That's not going to happen. I think that front office did their due diligence to be like, what is LaVine worth? Because I mean, if in this draft, if the Blazers were like, you know what, yeah, we'll give you essentially Scoot Henderson, and another player for Zach LaVine, because that seemed to be what they were looking for. Then, like we talked about, dude, you do that. I think any team does that, and I think that's a very different ballgame. But that wasn't the case, and no one else is going to offer that. So they've made the Vooch extension, which honestly, yes, like no one's going to be happy that Vooch got extended, because he's just a reminder of a deal that did not lead anywhere. But Vooch is the best option at center that we have right now on the market. And we signed Javon Carter, answers our 3-point shooting issue, keeps around the same level of defense that you got from Pat Bev, that does not replace the level of defense you got with Lonzo, but it comes close. And you signed Torrey Craig, another 3-point shooting switchable wing that's going to be a better fit than Derek Jones. I mean, they're doing little things to try and fill out the roster and hopefully answer enough small questions that can give them space to improve on whatever the mess was last season. But I think these are not moves that are like, hey, we're going to rebuild. There's zero signal for that. Absolutely not. I mean, it's not going to happen. They're not trading him. They're not trading DeRozan. Not trading Vooch, obviously. They're not trading anybody. We're just going to gear up for another season with the same thing. Can't wait.
I really see your excitement there, and I think obviously the Knicks are obviously in a better position than the Bulls at this moment, but I think they're obviously, it's looking like they're just going to be running it back again with the same squad. Obviously, they added DiVincenzo. We'll see how that goes. I wasn't totally sure about that deal, but I think he can provide fit a nice role within this team and have a solid impact. One of the guys, obviously another Boston guy, Malcolm Brogdon. Is he a guy you think could be on the move, or you think he'll stay in Boston?
I think it's really sketchy with the injury thing. Mm-hmm. Nobody's talking about it. The fact that he got pulled out of that trade for injury concerns, that doesn't mean nothing. Their daily double negative. I don't think that doesn't mean nothing, because he's a guy that any team would love to have in terms of his contribution. But if he couldn't be included in the trade and said they had to push a Marcus Smart trade like that tells me that injury is significant enough for contending teams to think twice. That's concerning. That's concerning for the Celtics. I don't know what kind of long-term issue this could have, but hopefully it's not something that bleeds into too far into the season.
Yeah, that's fair. It's going to be interesting to keep an eye on and see if they'll be looking to move him because of what potentially the injury might be, and kind of get that done under the radar, or if they'll just look to move on, because obviously they were willing to give him up in the original Porzingis deal, and now obviously they've given up Smart, so maybe they'll just think, no, we're going to run it back with him now. We need that extra bit of guard cover. Just to finish it out, then, what's one semi-realistic guy that you would like to see traded off the team they're currently playing on now?
Siakam.
Yes, thank you.
Siakam.
We agree again. Absolutely.
He should. There we go. I think we saw the peak of his powers, and they're great. I mean, he's an all-star. He's an all-NBA player, and probably Siakam's probably the most underrated all-NBA player in the league.
Yeah,
easily. And what he does on the Raptors is tremendous, awesome. But the Raptors are not going anywhere with Scottie not reaching his potential and Siakam being a fringe all-NBA player. Which, I mean, like he's a great player, but where are you going? And I think that's why the whole the Jalen McDaniels deal just feels like this is an oversimplification and obviously not true of the genius that is Masai Ujiri, but like to just dumb it down, it's like, dude, like why do we keep pushing for these types of players? Like where's the construct here? And Siakam could be in several places where he could be a tremendous contributor with all he does. But I would love to see him in a different situation where there's a little bit more harmony in terms of a roster construction. It feels like there's not the roster around him that fully makes sense, that would contribute to the type of team success that would put him on the map, that would not keep him underrated. And it would also give Scotty a chance to like just kind of put pressure on himself to be the guy. Like, don't rely on OG, don't rely on Siakam. Like, you're the guy. Like, you have that talent. So I don't know if that deal materializes, but I mean, he's a guy that I think can be had. It seems like his name is not, he's not untouchable. Nobody's untouchable, but Raptors are going to eventually hit a wall. And I think it'll become pretty clear this year. And that's going to be the point where, what do you do with an all NBA level player on a team that's not meant to compete as constructed, with a player that who should be replacing what he does in a championship level scenario? So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one that I had listed there as well. I think he's definitely a guy who should be on a contender. And I'm just saying, I think I would take Siakam over Julius Randle in New York. I'm gonna put that out there. I think I'd be, not that would be a straight up deal or anything, but I'm just saying I think I prefer a guy like Siakam over Julius Randle, especially with the way that I know Jalen Brunson can lead the team and lead the scoring and the all round game of Siakam. You got anything to say on that? No? No? Yeah. We'll just let that slide. We'll just let that slide.
We'll let that slide. I'll let you. I'm gonna find some time to compile the list of Julius Randle trades that you've come up with over the past year and a half.
And then watch me love every minute of him when he's averaging 25 during the regular season and then becomes a dud again when we get back to the playoffs. But anyway, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for joining us. My thanks to Chris for joining me as always. Remember, you like what you're hearing. We are everywhere at Coast to Coast NBA. And remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.